Before the high-stakes Alaska meeting with the US president, Putin prepares to hand historical materials. Maps and narratives meant to portray Ukraine as an artificial state, says Kyiv, calling it dangerous propaganda aimed at justifying war and carving borders. Trump calls the talks a chess game, hinting at deals, land swaps, and a second meeting with Zelensky. As world leaders circle the table, Ukraine warns Russia isn't preparing for peace. On the eve of the first face-to-face meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump in Alaska, Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation warned that Moscow is preparing to weaponize history at the negotiating table. In a statement on August 14th, the center claimed Putin plans to present Trump with historical materials designed to portray Ukraine as an artificial state during their summit. According to the center, the package will include geographical maps aimed at justifying Russia's territorial claims and ongoing military aggression. The Ukrainian agency cautioned that the Kremlin routinely deploys distorted historical narratives to legitimize its actions, depicting Ukraine as historically dependent on Russia and its sovereignty as illegitimate.
No historical facts, let alone pseudo-historical fantasies, can be the basis for territorial claims and do not justify armed aggression against other countries.
Putin has repeatedly leaned on what Kyiv calls pseudo-historical arguments in public remarks. In a 2024 interview with far-right US commentator Tucker Carlson, he delivered a 30-minute monologue on Russia-Ukraine history that Ukrainian officials say was riddled with inaccuracies and distortions. Trump has previously suggested that a peace deal could involve both sides swapping land, a stance that has alarmed Kyiv and European capitals. He has not specified what land swaps would entail. Russia is accused of illegally annexing Ukraine's Crimea in 2014, followed in 2022 by parts of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson oblasts after staging sham referenda. A source in Ukraine's presidential office told the Kyiv Independent that Moscow's proposal would require Kyiv to withdraw from Ukrainian-controlled parts of the partially occupied Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts in exchange for a Russian pullback from parts of Sumy and Kharkiv oblasts. Putin has also demanded that Ukraine relinquish control of the Ukrainian-held parts of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia oblasts and accept a ban on NATO membership as preconditions for peace. These conditions, echoed during earlier peace talks in Istanbul, have been firmly rejected by President Volodymyr Zelensky, who insists that a ceasefire must be the first step toward negotiations, a position backed by Ukraine's European partners. US President Donald Trump has outlined his approach to an upcoming meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, set for August 15th, describing the talks as the opening move in a strategic chess game over the war in Ukraine. Speaking on The Brian Kilmeade Show on August 14th, Trump said the first meeting could pave the way for a follow-up session involving Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, though he estimated only a 25% chance of success in the initial round. Trump compared the meeting to the first move in a chess match, warning there is only a 1 in 4 chance it will succeed. Trump expressed confidence that Putin is now ready to make a deal, suggesting that sanctions pressure may have influenced Moscow's position. He said Putin appears convinced an agreement is possible, but warned of very severe consequences if no deal is reached. Since returning to the White House, Trump has prioritized ending the conflict. He said a potential second meeting, featuring himself, Putin, and Zelensky, would tackle sensitive territorial and boundary disputes.
This meeting sets up the second meeting. The second meeting is going to be very, very important, because that's going to be a meeting where they make a deal. And I don't want to use the word divvy things up, but to a certain extent, it's not a bad term, okay? But there will be a give and take as to boundaries, lands, etc., etc. The second meeting is going to be very, very, very important. I'm not going to negotiate their deal. I'm going to let them negotiate their deal.
Trump also mentioned during the Fox interview that he has 3 locations in mind for a follow-up meeting with Putin and Zelensky.
We have an idea of 3 different locations, depending on what happens with my meeting. I'm going to be calling up President Zelensky and the European leaders, and let's get Zelensky over to wherever we're going to meet.
Trump, during the interview, also said it would be up to Putin and Zelensky to strike an agreement. On August 14th, President Putin praised US President Trump for his efforts to broker an end to war, as preparations continued for the Friday summit between the American and Russian leaders in Alaska.
I will tell you about the stage we are at with the current American administration, which, as everyone knows, is making, in my opinion, quite energetic and sincere efforts to stop the hostilities, stop the crisis, and reach agreements that are of interest to all parties involved in this conflict, in order to create long-term conditions for peace both between our countries and in Europe, and in the world as a whole, if at the next stage we reach agreements in the area of control over strategic offensive weapons. That is what I wanted to say at the beginning.
While Putin signaled optimism, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky pursued his diplomatic push. On August 14th, he met British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in London as part of a series of meetings ahead of the Trump-Putin summit. Zelensky, however, struck a cautious tone the day before. On August 13th, he posted on X that he sees no sign Russia is preparing to end the war.
At present, there is no sign that the Russians are preparing to end the war. Our coordinated efforts and joint actions of Ukraine, the United States, Europe, and all countries that seek peace can definitely compel Russia to make peace.
All eyes will be on Friday's meeting to see if it delivers a breakthrough, sets the stage for further negotiations, or ends with both sides retreating to familiar positions.